Okay, today is October 9, 2020, and the Tucson Astrologers Guild is proud to present Renn Butler. He's speaking on 2020 Insight, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, and the death, rebirth struggle of the human psyche.
Great
I
to
only
be
had to
here.
take one look at his homepage of Renn's website to know that I wanted to hear what he would say if we asked him to do a lecture for us. His books that you can see on that homepage of his website, rennbutler.com, The Archetypal Universe, Oh Goddess, Pathways to Wholeness, have received some excellent reviews by well-known people in this field, such as Stanislav Grof, Stefan Forrest, Becca Tarnas. I'm really excited to hear what Renn has to say. So put your hands together visually and welcome Renn to Tucson Astrologers Guild.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. And my partner Carmen is sitting back there. You might be able to see her. She's joining us as well. It's just surreal, the technology, you know, it just, it never fails to impress me, you know, where we've come with this sort of real-time sharing. I did so much of my astrology research in a relative vacuum, vis-a-vis the larger astrology community. And I knew there was a vibrant astrology community. I would hear about Arizona, Tempe, Arizona, I think published a number of books and so on. So it's sort of, this is like the future has arrived for me. So thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate being here. We couldn't help but overhear from time to time some of the things happening in your news. So I'm not going to make this an explicitly political talk, but I just want to say that, you know, from my vantage point as a Canadian up here who has spent time in the States, living in California in my 20s, I have utmost faith in the positive side of the U.S. Psyche, the good side of the U.S. soul, the good karma. And I am sure that after this Pluto return transit has passed, you know, the U.S. chart is in its Pluto return. I think that is really an incisive symbol for what has been happening here with the last 4 years, especially, that there will be a dramatic positive rebirth. And I like some of the things I'm hearing, you know, coming from some of the other folks in the United States politics. So again, thanks. Okay, somebody's got their, I'm just gonna mute that person. I don't know if I can. So there will be time for questions at the end. It'd probably be good to write them down for now, and then you can just ask them in person as we go. Let me just ask a question. How many of you are, you know, would call yourself really experienced astrologers? Like, yeah, a few. Yeah, I know it'll be quite hard to impress you. So, all right, I'm going to share my screen and pull up my. There we go. So you can hear me okay? I'm going to just go down here so I can see somebody live there. Annika, I can see you, and I can see you, Derek. So if I need to ask a question, I'll be able to see your reaction. Great, so everything is coming through well. So I thought I would call this 2020 Insight. It's kind of a pun. Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, and the death rebirth struggle of the human psyche. So I was raised Mormon. I was born in 1960. I'll show my chart at the end, or the chart details. This is me on the left. In Seattle, my dad was doing grad school at the University of Washington in about 1965. And here we are again. And then they left the Mormon church in 1969 and started a back to the land commune. And so that was quite a major shift in the sort of other direction, you could say. I attribute that to my Saturn Uranus quincunx, 150 degrees. You know, it was like a very Saturnian first 9 years of my life, and then came this incredible influx of new ideas and freedom, and it was an amazing breakthrough in my life. There we are in about 1977. I'm on the left. So you can see the change that happened from the late 60s. I had the good fortune of going to Esalen Institute in the fall of 1979 as a work scholar. I don't know if any of you have been there, but this is a view looking out into the western horizon. Here is the Esalen Gardens. And one of the amazing people I was able to meet was Rick Tarnas. When I first met him, he was 27 and I was 17. So that was a while ago. He was very turned on and excited about astrology and some of the discoveries he was making. And he inspired me greatly. This is the book that came out in, I believe, 92. And then this one, don't often hear about this, but this is the book that I often recommend to people when they say, what is a good beginner book of astrology? This is a great look at the basic principles of combining planetary archetypes, focusing on Uranus aspects. I love this book if you don't have it. And then, of course, his blockbuster, Cosmos and Psyche. I'm just going to get rid of this. I'm going to hide the meeting controls there. That's so much nicer. I published this book in 2014. The core of it is session reports from psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy of colleagues that I collected. And I correlated those powerful inner sessions with the astrological transits of the people during the session. So if you're interested in having a look at that. And then the archetypal universe is kind of a handbook. I used Ebertein's combination of stellar influences as an inspiration. And I believe that was actually published in Tempe, Arizona. So you have a long noble provenance there for that important book. And then this one just came out this summer. And this focuses on astrology of relationships. Archetypal Universe has major sections on the astrology of dreams. Now here is what's happening now. I have, let's see here. Okay, looks like I removed the inner planets for this one. The most important transit in the sky right now is, of course, this triple conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto. This is for 7:30 Victoria time. We'll be in that Saturn-Pluto conjunction until December 2021. In archetypal astrology, we use orbs for conjunctions and oppositions of 10 to 15 degrees. For these powerful outer planet alignments, 15 degrees. And so that takes us through another year and a half. We're halfway through that Saturn conjunct Pluto. The Jupiter conjunct Pluto, we've got that through January, so about another 4 months or so. Another interesting thing that's happening, the sextile from Neptune to Jupiter is nice right now. There's also an interesting semi-square from Uranus to Neptune. Now it's out of orb right now. I use a 2-degree orb on, semi-square rather. But Uranus is moving retrograde. It will come back within that 2-degree orb of the semi-square to Neptune. So we're still in it. And that connects us with the great Uranus-Neptune conjunction of 1985 to 2001. And the development of the internet and the incredible potential for interconnected consciousness in the global village that the internet has enabled. This Uranus adding the element of electronics and electricity, and the sort of suddenness of it, and then Neptune, the fusion, the lack of boundaries, the sort of greater wholeness, and the sort of more idealistic side of the internet. So this pandemic, which has forced many things like this astrology meeting to happen online, is showing us the positive side and reminding us of the blessing of the internet right now. Of course, every part of the human psyche is in full display on the internet, including the shadow, but I am very grateful for the technology. So we're halfway between the 1990s conjunction of Uranus Neptune and the coming square, which begins in about 2026 or 2027. Here I've added in Mars, and as you know, we have these dynamic squares from Mars to the Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto for the rest of the year. You know, Mars instigates and catalyzes and sort of forces issues. It puts it right in our face. I'll just say very briefly an overview of this Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, and then we'll go in depth into Stanislav Grof's research in the human psyche and Tarnas astrological correlations. I'm just going to, looks like you're the only person on there live, Derek, so thank you. The essence of it is the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Pluto empowers whatever it touches. So Pluto empowers and brings into being with enormous force the Saturn archetype of constriction, boundaries, the sort of social distancing, the fear around this pandemic. If you think about the last Saturn-Pluto conjunction in the early 80s, 81 to 84, this was the beginning of the HIV AIDS epidemic, and nobody knew in the early 80s how serious it was going to be. So there was a very similar sense of danger and threat, even apocalyptic fear in some circles around it. Didn't turn out to be as, horrible as, some people thought, but still very serious. And Helen Caldicott, for Physicians for Social Responsibility, was traveling the world warning about the dangers of nuclear winter in the early 80s. Many people have forgotten, but this was the first term of Ronald Reagan, the rapid escalation of the nuclear arms race, and there was tremendous fear about what would happen if there was a nuclear exchange. And so that was the last Saturn-Pluto conjunction. The one before that, of course, in the late 40s, coincided with the beginning of the Cold War and the sort of stark realization that we were now living in a nuclear era. And so you can see these energies are not, they're not all love and light. It can be quite heavy, a sense of fear and danger and so on. Now, Jupiter amplifies it, and many people have commented, Jupiter is what makes the epidemic a pandemic, the sense of global threat or global shared journey or shared struggle. Jupiter, Pluto in particular corresponds to the sense of high drama that we're seeing, especially in US politics now. For example, the other day when President Trump was standing on the White House veranda there or porch, kind of like a la Mussolini, it was right classic Jupiter Pluto, and many people commented it just reminded them of this sort of dictator behaviors. However, Jupiter also, by making things bigger, it can help us to face the emotions that are underlying these planetary archetypes. In my time at Esalen, I was able to do Gestalt therapy quite a number of sessions. And one of the things they would say is, when you're feeling an emotion, make it bigger. If you are sad, let yourself cry. If you feel angry, yell, hit pillows. Don't yell at someone, but get the energy out. Jupiter can help us with that. It can help us to feel whatever the Saturn Pluto is bringing up for us, and turn up the volume, to 11, and thereby by feeling it, we consume it and release it from our system. The Jupiter-Saturn, of course, correlates to issues around jurisprudence, legal matters. Last year, there was, of course, at the, maybe just before it started, but at the beginning, the confirmation hearings of the Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, and now there's another vacancy that is trying to be filled. There's a lot of issues right now around rich and poor, different standards of medical treatment, the haves and the have-nots, and of course, prejudice, racism, are all associated with Jupiter-Saturn alignments. So that's just an overview of what we're in right now. I love this quote from Richard Tarnas. This is from an unpublished version of Prometheus the Awakener that he never published this. I had the privilege of reading this at Esalen in 1980. The process of the soul's unification with the divine is accomplished, as the medieval mystics taught, in a terrific union of iron with fire, of Saturn with Pluto, on a tangible cellular level. It is, in the end, death's two most terrible archetypes, Saturn and Pluto, who are the gods that grant the inner hero his sweetest awakening, his rebirth. And I apologize, if he was writing this now, he would be using gender neutral pronouns, and he would probably say the inner hero or heroine. He wrote this in 79. So theirs is the dark and brutal storm which brings in its wake the luminous serenity of a new dawn. Just as the birth canal fiercely constricts the infant in the process of freeing it, so do Saturn's dark contractions find their ultimate fulfillment through Pluto by finally cracking open the psyche, revealing the archetypal realm. I love this quote, and this is a privilege to be able to share this, something that he will probably never publish in his lifetime. So just a little background on how archetypal astrology developed. This is kind of the term that he loosely uses to describe the approach that he has put forth. It evolved out of Jungian and humanistic psychology, as many of you know. Championed by Dane Rudhyar and Jung, and brought into the astrological mainstream, not only by Rudhyar, but people like Liz Green and others. So it's client-centered. Astrology as an aid to psychological healing. So not so much about, predicting days to sell stocks, but more about psychological healing. The human striving for wholeness and self-actualization, how the client's own unconscious is co-creating their experience. This was Jung's infusion into the astrological world. The things that we're aware of in our mind are only a small, tip of the iceberg of our total being. And many of our deeper drives and behaviors and things that we interpret and things we attract and things we create come from our unconscious. And it's very important, therefore, to study and investigate, explore our unconscious in order to resolve some of the negative patterns. Glenn Perry, of course, said the emphasis not on events, but on the meaning behind events. I love that. So in archetypal astrology, and I coined the term holotropic astrology to describe that part of Tarnas' legacy or work, which specifically focuses on experiences in psychedelic and holotropic states, which I'll about to talk about. So it integrated Groff's research, the importance of the basic perinatal matrices, the value of entering these non-ordinary or holotropic states. We're the first culture in the history of life, or of Homo sapiens rather, that we know of, that has essentially tried to pave over the psyche and engineer a utopia on top of that pavement. But Groff has a good point. We still have the same emotions inside us that we had in the Stone Age. And so it's very important that we reintegrate responsible access to non-ordinary states of consciousness through holotropic breathwork, through responsible use of psychedelics in psychotherapy. There seem to be some things that can happen in those states which are necessary for human wholeness, human happiness, and problem solving and feelings of satisfaction. So Tarnas makes the point also that astrological meanings are multivalent and multi-leveled. There's not a one-to-one correlation between some astrological symbol and a specific outcome in the outer world. There's a range of possible meanings with every astrological symbolism. And we always have to keep that in mind when we're talking with our clients. We never know, unless we're psychic. I personally am not, what is going to happen. We can't tell from astrology alone. And then we also, in archetypal astrology, tend to focus on aspects and transits. The signs and houses, though valid and legitimate, we would see more as secondary symbol systems and more like the adjectives or adverbs, which act on the basic core meanings of the planetary alignments. So Tarnas says astrology is archetypally predictive rather than concretely predictive. Some of the things that like extra astrological factors that come into play are things like cultural context. For example, a woman with a Sun square Mars aspect in this culture could enjoy a wonderful sense of fulfillment in action, in physical activity, in sports, dynamic initiation, and so on. But in a traditional Sunni culture of the desert, of the Arabian Peninsula, Sun Mars might be a very difficult aspect for a woman to have. So you can see cultural context makes such a difference. Okay, so let's, good so far, Derek? Yeah. So Groff's expanded cartography of the Psyche and Tarnas astrological correlations. So here's Stan and Christina Groff. She's now deceased, unfortunately, about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. This is around 1990. Here he is with Tab Sparks, who is involved in, or Tab just passed away recently. Tab and his partner, Carrie, were involved in the Groff transpersonal training, training holotropic breathwork facilitators. And here Stan is with his present partner, wife, Brigitte Groff. She's actually born 3 days after I am, the same year. I was at Esalen in 1986 when she arrived as a work scholar. So it's quite amazing that, 35 years later, she's married to him. Quite remarkable. And there they are. And here he is with Albert Hoffman, one of his mentors, a discoverer of LSD. So Groff supervised 3,000 sessions, now 4,000, but at the time 3,000, and he had records of another 2,000. He eventually extrapolated out from this huge quantity of data a new cartography of the psyche. And he came to feel that psychedelics, when used responsibly, have the same role in psychiatry and psychology as the microscope in biology and the telescope in astronomy. So these are just some of his books. I love this one, Venture of Self-Discovery, a great book. I'd recommend that one if you're interested in checking it out. That's also a great book. Stormy Search for the Self. If you or someone you know is undergoing a spiritual emergency, a sudden acute eruption of unconscious contents, you may find this book to be quite helpful. Excuse me. That's another coffee table book with a lot of great art. So he coined the term holotropic. It's from holos, means wholeness, and tropein means moving toward. And it pertains to the faculty or the property in the human psyche, which he observed and which Jung was also aware of, that our psyches are self-regulating. we have what Groff calls an intrinsic healing intelligence or self-healing intelligence. Our psyches are always trying to process and get rid of traumatic material in our unconscious. And the goal of psychotherapy and self-exploration is to cooperate with that process, to go in the direction that things are already moving toward. This is me in 1989 in Dahlonega, Georgia, for my certification in holotropic breathwork. There's Christina Groff. So through his vast number of sessions that he conducted with these voluntary patients, Groff articulated 3 layers of the human unconscious. The first layer is the biographical, then the perinatal is deeper, and then the transpersonal realms are the deepest realms. He also coined the term transpersonal in 1968. Transpersonal psychology, of course, considered the 4th wave in psychology, evolved out of humanistic psychology. Abraham Maslow was not satisfied with humanistic psychology, which he had helped to create, and they wanted to reintegrate the human striving for spiritual, mystical experiences, and transpersonal psychology was born from that. So the biographical layer of the psyche, I won't read these. You can come back and look at this if you want to. These are the psychotraumas that are very well known from traditional psychotherapy. If you had any of these problems and went to traditional psychotherapist of almost any school, you would get probably quite a bit of sympathy and support for facing these things. We also carry positive memory systems in our psyche. There was one category, however, of psychotraumas which no major psychological school has integrated yet, which Groff found to be important. And these are serious illnesses, operations, or accidents. People could relive tonsillectomy, or that would be on the minor end, but things like diphtheria, whooping cough, attempted strangulation by a sibling, near drowning, things like that. These can leave traces in the psyche that can be then processed later. As self-exploration continues, everyone that Groff worked with eventually started having experiences that had obstetric qualities, as if they were reliving elements of their birth. Some of these experiences could then be independently verified by going to hospital records and checking the breech birth type of anesthesia used. But these experiences were more than just about obstetric memories. They seem to be a kind of a transform station where archetypal and transpersonal and collective energies would come into a human lifetime. And so the perinatal matrices, as he talks about them, have this biological obstetric core, but they also have, even more importantly, very powerful archetypal elements associated with them, as we'll see. I put this together. So Tarnas in the late 70s was living at Esalen and close friends with Stan Groff, and they were doing research together, and they realized that the meanings of these 4 perinatal matrices that Groff discovered based on the different stages of birth correlate, exactly with, and in very detailed and complex ways and nuanced ways, with the traditional meanings of the 4 outer planets in this order: Neptune, Saturn, Pluto, and Uranus, and we'll talk about that. This is, I believe, as important as Jung's research was in the archetypes, in synchronicity, in the self-regulating aspects of the psyche that are trying to move us toward wholeness and individuation. Groff's discoveries and Tarnas correlations, I believe, also represent an important infusion of new material into the astrological world, and they can help us to kind of understand the actions of these 4 outer planetary archetypes by transit and aspect, and kind of show their context within the natural order of birth and the spiritual death rebirth process. So beyond the perinatal realms were a number of transpersonal experiences that people would have in these holotropic or psychedelic states. And I won't read these, but some of these were studied by Jung, and some of them were not. For example, Jung didn't write about past life experiences, but these seem to be authentic and real, and sometimes people can verify those experiences by going to a library and reading up about a certain battle or things like that. So this is an amazing diagram that I don't know who put this together, but someone who knows Groff and Tarnas very well. But this is a very concise and kind of in-depth look at the structures of the psyche that we know so far. In my opinion, this is a pretty good, two-dimensional description of what is obviously a vastly complex and multi-leveled reality of our psyches. But you can see the ordinary ego consciousness at the top, then the personal unconscious with these biographical memories, then the perinatal matrices, and the birth chart is where the archetypal realm kind of comes, and where the divine is made flesh is one way you could look at it, where the archetypal becomes personal, it incarnates into a human being. And then deeper than that are these, ancestral memories, collective memories, past lives, mythological experiences, and so on. Now these he calls systems of condensed experience. He observed that when people start reliving events from their unconscious, experiences from their unconscious, they don't appear in a random way, but in a series of memories that are connected by a similar sensation or emotion. So you could relive a series of personal successes in your life. When you graduated from high school, and then, some achievement when you were a child. And then this would then attach to the memory of escaping the birth canal and the completed birth, is the fourth perinatal matrix. There might even be a deeper root in some positive karmic memory, like a happy period or a successful overcoming of obstacles in your racial history or your ancestral history or something like that. And then negative ones would similar. There could be memories of choking in your life, maybe near drowning. And then this could be attached to experiences of choking in the birth canal. And then a deeper root might be being hanged on the gallows in a past life. So it shows how the kind of connecting element would be the same emotion or sensation. And all of these are correlated with aspects and transits for each person. And so we can begin to, it can give us more richness of language and descriptive capacity to talk about the different parts of our psyches. Like I have a Moon-Saturn conjunction, and whenever it's heavily transited, then my COEX system of condensed experience, maybe around feeling isolated and separated from other people, could emerge. That would be one example. I've just come through transiting Pluto on my natal moon Saturn. This is my last month of it, actually. Over 5.5 years that transit has lasted, and this is the last month. So it definitely brought a lot up, and I was able to work through a lot of it. So let's now look at the perinatal layer. This will help us to understand the transits that are happening in the sky right now. So basic perinatal matrix 1, union with the mother. Blissful oceanic feelings, a sense of no boundaries, feelings of cosmic unity, perception of higher meaning. In a good womb situation where the mom is is healthy and happy and being supported and not using drugs or alcohol, conditions for the fetus would be close to ideal. There could be overlays of images of heaven or paradise when people relive this memory. There can also be toxic womb experiences. I won't get into those, with if the mother was really ill or was using drugs or alcohol, things like that. But both of these would have a Neptunian quality. Tarnas was able to make this correlation. The fetus consciousness is still all over the place at this stage. Biologically, it's in some ways part of the mother's body still. Yeah, it doesn't have a individuated consciousness yet. It's conscious, but its consciousness is partly merged with that of the mother, with the whole universe, and many parts within the universe. People can identify with serene aquatic life forms like whales or jellyfish. It's a beautiful painting. And this is one of Groff's own paintings from an LSD session in which he identified with the fetus in a state of blissful union with the entire cosmos. The womb, space, and the ocean all share the quality of no boundaries. And that is the essence of the Neptune archetype. And Groff refers to this experience as the melted or oceanic type of ecstasy. So images of heavens from various cultures, relatively independent of the subject's beliefs or culture of origin, something like laboratory proof of Jung's collective unconscious can emerge. This is from a holotropic breathwork session, Pilgrimage to My Inner Buddha, by an Argentinian participant. There was a Sun-Neptune conjunction in the sky in square with her natal Neptune. So we know that would have been in her 40s. Now, this is another holotropic breathwork session in the lap of the goddess. I started a Facebook group many years ago. If you are interested, it's called Archetypal Astrology and Transpersonal Psychology. And we actually use this as the banner photo with her permission. So another Argentinian transit of Neptune conjunct her natal moon. And this is from a holotropic breathwork session, Kundalini Mother, by an Italian artist during a world transit of Uranus conjunct Neptune in the late 90s. She unfortunately passed away, and I got permission from her sister to publish this, but she didn't know when the date of drawing this, but she knew it was in the late 90s. So we can also kind of use these same insights to help us understand the world of culture. For example, this incredible video and song by Enya, Orinoco Flow from 1988. When I first saw this in 1990 in Larkspur, California, where I was living, I just felt like a new world had dawned. This was, to me, the greatest single rock video of the Uranus-Neptune conjunction. Some of you remember the magical time that decade was. So, so there was Uranus-Neptune world transit conjunction, and then she also had transiting Pluto conjunct her natal Neptune, and she was born with Jupiter square Neptune. And there's a sense of oceanic abundance and flowing grace in this video. I highly recommend checking it out. Enya also was born with Venus trine Uranus, and the color, the brightness, the sort of sparkling quality is certainly an expression of that Venus-Uranus. And then another wonderful expression during the 90s was the movie Contact, July 97, during Jupiter-Uranus-Neptune triple conjunction. Did either of you see that, Annika or David? Yeah, what an amazing movie. Directed by Carl Zemeckis, Robert Zemeckis, born with Uranus square Neptune in the 50s, of course. The novel by Carl Sagan. He's born with the sesquiquadrate. He published it in September 1985 in the first year of the Uranus-Neptune conjunction. Remember, we use a 15-degree orb on these outer planet cycles. So Jodie Foster is sort of led by this higher intelligence and with Jody and the scientists of the world to build this technology that helps her to go to another dimension or another part of space. And she ends up in a kind of womb-like paradise. Think of this oceanic ecstasy that Groff talks about. And it was quite incredible because when she reached out to touch the walls, remember, they're kind of squishy. Do you remember that, Annika? She touches and it's kind of, and they're much closer than they appear. And this, you know, Carl Sagan had met Groff and probably read his work, and it's possible that he kind of wrote that into the novel, but they certainly captured this exquisitely. That's my favorite movie from the 90s, and I consider it one of the most important movies of the century, tied with 2001, A Space Odyssey, and I'll compare and contrast those at the end. So in the years 85 to 2001, many people enjoyed an enhanced access to blissful Neptunian states. As Jodie Foster comes down, she's kind of in this fetal position, and you can see they've really captured that perinatal archetype in many ways. Now, the basic perinatal matrix 2, no exit, as a kind of reference to Sartre's play. Feelings of this is based on the early stage of labor when the cervix is still closed. The water breaks and there's contractions of the uterine walls, but there's no way out of the situation yet. The womb has been lost, and what was all-encompassing, nurturing, soft, aquatic realm now becomes a kind of pressurized chamber. Feelings of loss, compression, constriction, hopelessness, lack of meaning and connection. Groff found in his patients this was a very important prototype for feelings of depression. And so many people that are currently being treated for depression, you know, in a chemical way, a pharmaceutical way, have not had the opportunity to face the roots of their depression fully. There's a finite amount of this in the psyche, and full surrender to these states, including the sense that one will never get out, the feeling of hopelessness and helplessness, consumes them from the system and allows the process to move to the next stage. And in its purest form, Saturn is about boundaries, constriction, compression, contraction. It's very different than Neptune. Neptune represents the spiritual totality, the universal field of consciousness. In this kind of a state, we are now very separated from the world around us, and it is antagonistic and sort of victimizing us. And Sartre, born with a Moon-Saturn conjunction, had that famous comment, hell is other people. And so the moon archetype in his Moon-Saturn sort of inflects the Saturn toward the moon of, you know, connecting with other people, belonging, and so on. So here is the totality again of the perinatal sequence, just so you can see where we are in our discussion. The onset of the second perinatal matrix, Groff called them basic perinatal matrices, so, or BPM2. High dose LSD session, the sense of being drawn into a giant whirlpool or maelstrom. The person had transiting Saturn opposite his natal sun. Now, this was a very intense experience, but by the end of the day, this person was laughing and you know, it ended in a very happy, ecstatic place. So we can face these things if we have the proper support to go into them, and we go into them in the right set and setting, like a soundproof room with one or two therapists that are there that will hold our hands if we need to. Groff's work involved eye shades and headphones with evocative music. So the client lies down, you know, first ingests the psychedelic catalyst, Then when it begins to come on, they lie down and then put the eye shades and headphones on and then just surrender deeply to the inner material as it arises. So images of the fall from paradise from various cultures can emerge as people are reliving this stage of labor. This is another session of Groff's Saturn opposition, his natal sun. The incipient uterine contractions are experienced as an attack by a monstrous octopus. There can also be a sense of a devouring spider being caught in a spider's web. And he found, for example, that was the source of arachnophobia, fear of spiders, was this memory of that stage of birth where the infant is being held, but there's no exit. Various hells can emerge from different cultures. Constriction, identification with victims of all times and places. These experiences create enormous compassion for others and the suffering of others throughout human history. This from a holotropic breathwork session of a Finnish, he was from Finland, holotropic breathwork of the second perinatal matrix. He identified with an old woman wandering in a landscape of eternal pain and loneliness. And he had Saturn square his natal sun and a world transit of sun opposition Saturn. Now, in everyday life, you know, you can have a Saturn square sun transit. I have Saturn square my sun right now, and I had sun square my natal Saturn this week. And I'm born with sun square Saturn, and it's square in the sky. So it's happening in every way it can happen for me right now. But I'm in a fairly happy mood, and you know, my life is going fairly well. But if I was, when I do mini sessions, or if I was to do a mini session, let's say with a cannabis, for example, there's going to be some darker experiences. There's going to be some suffering, and it's very valuable to go into those and sort of in a condensed way facing it rather than having it spread out through our lives, you know, every minute of the day. Now, some great movie ideas. We'll just finish a couple more and then we can take our break. So here's a wonderful example from cinema. Ridley Scott's dystopian sci-fi Blade Runner 1982, often considered the greatest sci-fi movie ever made. He was born with the Saturn-Neptune opposition and also had transiting Neptune square his natal Saturn. I'm just going to make an adjustment here. Yeah. Have you seen this one, David? Yeah. So this is a dark, bleak, and vacant atmosphere. It's depressed and drizzly world, busy but meaningless and alienated atmosphere. And then there are these advertising ships that are floating by. A new life awaits you in the off-world colonies. It's a promise cynically offset by the grim reality of life on Earth. It's a promise of a better life, but it seems hard to believe given the ominous and numbing toxicity of the present scene. Paradise is nearby, these off-world colonies, but not here. And this we can see this is an example of Saturn, Neptune, because it's a hellish world, but people are free to leave. There's no compression, and that's the Neptunian element. With Saturn-Neptune transits, we can sometimes feel like we've lost a state of grace or innocence or some positive place, and we can still see the positive place that we were in, but we somehow can't regain it. And this is what he explores there, this sort of juxtaposition of the Saturnian realm and then this Neptunian paradise that you might be able to get to, or maybe not, you know. So that's a great movie. Now, a little more extreme version of the second perinatal matrix would be James Cameron's Terminator, released in 1984. He's born, of course, with a moon at the Saturn-Pluto midpoint, quite close. This was the final year of the Saturn conjunct Pluto world transit that we were talking about earlier. This bleak first scene, tank treads rolling across human skulls, this, an urban apocalypse, killing machines, exterminating humans like vermin in a nightmarish futuristic hell of dark smoking ruins, really captures this sort of fallen world where humans are just hunted like vermin, very much right out of a psychedelic session under the influence of that second matrix, BPM2. And then Schwarzenegger, of course, Sun, Saturn, Pluto, triple conjunction from the late 40s. You know, when he was born, I believe he's a Leo, if I remember correctly. I can't quite remember, maybe not. Violent cyborg assassin, man of steel, this sort of Saturn Pluto toughness that he has. And that's one thing about these Saturn Pluto transits. We're all facing things that we maybe never thought we would have to face or could even face. I mean, for people who don't like Trump and are afraid of Trump, the sense of ominous potential of sliding into totalitarianism, you know, it's just like, it's very alarming for people. I know people that like Trump have they project on the left, thinking that, you know, the danger's coming through the progressive elements, that their way of life will be swept away by changes and so on. But for everybody, there's this sense of threat and this need to endure. And, you know, with the pandemic, there's not much we can do but be safe, wear masks, social distance, and we will get through it. So this Terminator, you know, no concern for humans, this famous line, that Terminator is out there. It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear. And it absolutely will not stop ever until you are dead. This is what the young hero says to Sarah Connor. He's trying to save her because she becomes the mother of the sort of the military savior. The same could be said about the existential pressures that force us onward to face death and face our fear of death and reach transcendence. And Saturn Pluto is, as Tarnas wrote in that quote that we looked at, that sense of compression and contraction bearing down on the world psyche, like a hard birth contraction, pushing us out toward the other side. Now, for some people, they're going to be feeling the Saturn archetype the most strongly during these times. Transits like this could be the worst time in someone's life. And I know some of you out there are probably suffering deeply under this time. You have my total sympathy. The most that astrology can do in that situation is to give you a sense of the time limit of it. You know, it will pass. But, you know, if we think about Groff's research, remember just to feel those feelings. Make some time every day to surrender to them, feel them deeply, let them register, feel the fear inside you. That doesn't make things worse. It actually makes things better. Other people will be feeling the Pluto side. And there's a sense here of moving toward the light at the end of the tunnel, driving now toward that completed birth. And some of you will be feeling that side more. So it's interesting that the Michael Biehn character says going through time is like white light, like being born maybe. And he's saving the mother so the hero can be born, and gripping to the last jaw-crushing compression, she finally is able to kill the Terminator. I highly recommend seeing this, very perinatal imageries. At one point, she's crawling through these kind of industrial tunnels in this factory, and he's crawling behind her, trying to grab her, and she's struggling through, wending her way through to try to get away from him. It's just very much out of a birth experience. A good example of that Saturn feeling or BPM2 feeling is Pink Floyd's The Great Gig in the Sky during the Saturn opposition Neptune world transit. Some of you may remember this. Check it out on YouTube. And this Claire Torrey was singing this sort of this long vocal part in the song. And then another example, Eric Clapton, Saturn square Neptune natally, that song that he wrote for his son who died when he fell out of a window in their apartment. Just absolutely tragic. And then just one example of art, de Goya's, or Francisco de Goya's rather, Saturn square Sun or Neptune in T square with his son. So this is what he has natally. Saturn devouring his son is the name of this one. And this is a BPM2 image which portrays the onset of time and mortality. Kronos devouring his children is a personification of the fact that time destroys all things. So all things are mortal. And this is something that we face very deeply in this perinatal unfolding, what Joseph Campbell calls the hero or heroine's journey. That is a mythological depiction of what Groff is talking about in a more kind of obstetric way. But Campbell and Groff were friends, and Campbell actually set up Stan and Christina Groff. She had been a student of his, and she sent him to meet Stan in California. And he knew that Stan was practicing on a sort of therapeutic level what Campbell was studying intellectually, mythologically. So we can just come to here, and this would probably be a good time for what's a good amount of time? A 7-minute break or 5-minute? How about a 5 minute? Okay. Okay.
5-minute break. Okay.
Okay. See you in 5 minutes.
Okay, we can talk and chat. Okay. Well, stop your screen share. Can you come back to? Thank you.
Yeah. How's everybody doing?
Excellent.
It looks good. So go take your break. We'll
see you in a couple of minutes.
Very interesting.
Oh, thanks, Gail.
I don't know who said that. Was that Katrina or was that?
Yeah, it was me. It was me.
Okay,
Katrina. Oh, thank you, Katrina. Thanks, Katrina.
Anybody else want to say anything while we're on break?
I got to experience Stanislav Grof's holotropic breath work and this whole birth experience thing. I went to, in 2002, went to a workshop and spontaneously went into this birth experience. It's very powerful. So I've always had huge interest and respect for this, what he's talking about right now. It's really amazing.
I'm noticing the similarities between Renn and Daniel, because Daniel's work with holotropic breath work, he was actually doing his workshops when he was in Portland, partly astrology, partly holotropic breath work. Anybody else had an experience of holotropic breath work? But he's pretty quiet. You got a couple minutes, you can say something.
Gail.
Yes, Margot. Yes.
Didn't you and I go to a holotropic breath work, not with Stan Groff, but with somebody else who had studied with him back 30 years ago when I lived here before?
Yes. I can't remember you being there, but I was. I did a couple of breath work workshops with, I can't remember who it was. Catherine, what, I think she's still in town. Catherine, somebody, I can't remember her name. She was still here in Tucson.
Okay, can
Do you
you hear?
remember the person's name? Hi, Katrina.
I don't, it was a woman. But
Uh-huh.
I don't remember her name.
Can I make a comment?
Yep.
Sure, Katrina.
Oh my God, I'm like having a total, a total BPM flashback experience while I'm listening to this, because oh my God, I almost died giving birth to my first child. And so in that experience, like when he just read that thing that said, no concern for the human survival. You can't stop unless you die. I mean, that's what that labor was like. It's like I almost died. I would have died if my groovy doctor that just happened to be walking by the outside of the hospital when my midwife rushed me to the hospital when I was bleeding to death, if he didn't like save my life. And so when I'm listening to all this, it's a very personal about these archetypes very clearly manifesting. But my question about it is that, so, you know, I guess that Renn's talk kind of makes it sound like, well, you go through this horrible thing and then there's the rebirth that happens after Pluto. But I was 19 when that happened. And I can't say that, basically what happened for me from that is I had always felt very kind of safe and powerful in the world. And then after that, which was really a near close to death experience, you know, there was good stuff in my life, but I always felt more afraid. Like I didn't feel that sort of invincibility of youth. I felt very clearly that there were a lot of strong forces at play, way bigger than me, that could just smash me at any time. So I can't say that I really had a wonderful kind of transformation from that. So I'm kind of curious to hear what Renn might, I'm really looking forward to, yeah, so.
He did mention that the psychedelic experiences, or that there were certain things that a person never recovered completely from. Was that serious illness or deep trauma, where you had experienced a lot of pain that remains in the psyche.
And so
Does
his work also indicate then that those kinds of traumas can be healed through the psychedelic the therapy?
No, I didn't get that. It's just that there's some things that don't heal.
That's not.
I think we can ask them. We can ask him again to talk about that when he finishes his PowerPoint. But keep that in mind, Katrina. You can put it in the chat.
Okay.
Right, there's Tom talking. And Katrina, were you able to change the boundaries on the picture screen ratio?
Somebody put Derek King solving gave me an instruction, and so I could see Renn's face bigger instead of just the printouts that he's showing.
I also told you to put your cursor on the boundary between the picture and the screen share that he was doing, and you can move it just like in your computer when you're looking at two documents.
Okay, good. Who is this guy?
Because I was experimenting about that with that when you asked the question, and I said I didn't really know, but I experimented and found that it worked. So we'll go from gallery view back to speaker view pretty soon. When Renn gets ready, we'll let him.
Yeah, Gail, this is Tom.
Yes.
I just put
Yes.
a comment or question in for Renn.
Yeah, I saw your comment. Yeah.
No hurry on that one. Yeah, thanks.
yeah, I think I'll let Ren continue with his PowerPoint. And then we're starting to collect some questions. And when you get ready, Ren, just let me know and I'll see if I can find those questions.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Sounds good. Yes, I
Are
am.
you ready to resume? I'll ask
Yeah.
everybody to once again mute themselves. So Katrina, if you want to mute yourself, or I can. Yeah.
Great. Can you hear me again? Frank, you can hear me?
We can hear you just fine, Ren.
Okay. Okay, great. I'm going to hide video panel again. Nope, I didn't want to do that. I want to show video panel, hide floating meeting controls. Great. Okay. The third perinatal matrix is based on or rooted in the stage of birth, the dynamic stage of birth, when the cervix is now open and the fetus is being pressed through the narrow birth canal by powerful uterine contractions that can oscillate between 50 and 100 pounds of force. There's activation of enormous energies, driving pressures in this stage of birth, confrontation with the shadow side of human nature. There's a sense of there being a finite amount of suffering. Unlike the Saturnian BPM2 state, where there's a feeling that it will never end, here there's more of a purgatorial sense that you will eventually get out, light at the end of the tunnel. And Groff and Tarnas recognized that many of those same things are correlated with Pluto. And in the specifics that I'm about to look at. Activation of aggression and sense of titanic fight, a feeling of a struggle, is very common when people are reliving this stage of labor under powerful Pluto transits. But even elective cesarean people who didn't actually go through the birth canal will have many of these same elements emerge in their sessions. So they're not really caused by the obstetric experience. They're like an archetypal experience which is embodied or manifests in the flesh in birth, but the core of it is really this archetypal layer. And so there could be images of battles from all times and places, active attacks in battles or revolutions and things like that. Now there can also be, and we know that aggression and issues around power and power struggles are connected with Pluto. We've known that for a long time. So this was quite an amazing correlation that they were able to make with these planets. Now, Pluto is also connected with sexual energies, Dionysian energies, but when perinatal sexual feelings emerge, they tend to have a sadomasochistic component, Groff observed in people's sessions. And his theory is that it's because of the suffocation in labor. This creates a type of enforced sexual arousal. We know this from people who are hanged, can become aroused, or some people are turned on by hanging or autoerotic asphyxiation. And so the fact that our first sexual experience happens in the birth canal in a context of act of aggression and life-threatening suffocation for Groff became a very logical clinical basis for various sexual variations, deviations, or perversions. And so one of the most common would be sexual violence, this relationship between sex and aggression. So his clinical research leads us to suggest that people with strong Pluto transits or Pluto aspects who act out these energies are under the influence of unhealed perinatal material. And it really does offer a potential for society to decrease the total amount of it in the collective psyche once we reintroduce healing techniques which allow people to face this material. This is, this classic kind of image from S&M. Why would people want this, And if you think of this was an actual experience that we had in the birth canal where we're sort of anonymously being compressed and dehumanized it sort of is a plausible theory or connection. Also connected with BPM-3 and Pluto is the problem of evil and the relationship between good and evil. These sequences eventually deepen into confrontations with negative archetypal energies or wrathful deities, as they're called in Buddhism. Groff calls these themes the demonic. Now, the artist H.R. Giger, some of you may be familiar with his work. He was born with Pluto square Mars Saturn, just very similar to what we have right now. We have Mars square Saturn Pluto, and he was a master at capturing the perinatal layer of the psyche, is how Groff sees it. These are quite accurate kind of images for what people can see in high dose sessions when this material is activated. Be another example. The Marquis de Sade, as I talk about in O Goddess, had a similar natal aspects as Giger, but he acted them out unapologetically on other people. Giger just expressed them through his art. And then also connected here with the dynamic stage labor and Pluto is the scatological. People can have images of wallowing in excrement or issues around blood, feces and urine, feelings of nausea and disgust. Projectile vomiting is a very common manifestation in people's sessions as they're going through this material, but there's a finite amount of it. So very beneficial to face it. The famous underground artist Robert Crumb was born with Pluto Jupiter sextile Uranus. So, you know, Jupiter amplifies that Plutonic archetype. And he was really out there in his drawing. I don't know if familiar with Katrina and Gail, are you familiar with his work at all? Yeah, so this is part of a sequence where the guy is killing himself and he flushes himself down the toilet, and it very perinatal. Oh, mama, could this really be the end? And he's going in this winding path, and then he goes sort of to the center of the psyche or the universe and into light, very perinatal there, through this tube and this pipe, and then into light, and then wow, mom, you know, I mean, there's his artistic instincts coming forth. He probably didn't know Groff's work, but he just had this sort of memory of it, you know. And then look out, I'm coming through, and then this sort of triumphant sense. So that's the Jupiter Pluto sextile Uranus, this sense of spectacular, dramatic, grand rebirth. Now, contrast that with this interesting movie, Train Spotting. Either of you, Katrina and Gail, you're the ones I can see. Do you remember this number from 1996? Yeah, thumbs down. Yeah, it was Ewan McGregor. I hadn't, but Tom's a thumbs up on it. I just watched some clips of this recently, and it was a young Ewan McGregor, and who has become a big star. But here he is playing like a drug addict in Scotland, and very grimy world. Now, similar image of going down into a toilet. So that's the Pluto archetype, but Danny Boyle's natal aspect is the square with Saturn, which adds this sort of dingy, negative, dirty element to it, right? Unlike Robert Crumb, that grand Jupiter-Uranus sort of triumphant feeling. But when he dives down into the toilet to get his suppository of heroin that he forgot he had there, that's why he goes in there to get it. He ends up floating in this pristine water. That's the next shot here in the movie. This, by the way, is the worst toilet in Scotland. That's the name above the caption of this scene. And And so you can see that Neptune is combined with this Saturn Pluto in a three-way aspect. With Pluto sextile Neptune, we all have that, but Neptune semi-sextile Saturn. So for him, it resolves into the oceanic realm of this pristine water. So quite interesting to compare and contrast with Robert Crumb. Also in the scatological, people can have images of piles of rotting corpses and, you know, the mandatory result of every war and revolution. And they get a sense of the corruptibility of the human body and the sort of waste products. And this is what's called the scatological. There's a finite amount of this. And, you know, the Buddhists were aware of the need, for example, in some Buddhist practices, like in Tibet, they would watch a corpse, the monks would watch a corpse decompose for a month. And the idea was to really get a sense of the impermanence of forms. And, you know, this is the true nature of the physical realm, and to sort of face it. And by facing it, then our consciousness can move beyond it and re-access transcendent realms of unity, of impermanence, the eternal nature of the divine and the infinite nature of the divine. Unlike us, we are temporary and finite, our egos and our bodies. So finally, in this third matrix, people can have a sense of passing through purifying fire. Groff terms this pyrocatharsis, and we know that this fire is also connected with Pluto. The fire seems to have magical qualities, purifying everything that is rotten and corrupt in their souls and preparing them for rebirth. This is from an ayahuasca session of a female participant with transiting Pluto conjunct her natal sun and sun opposition natal Pluto. I've got transiting Pluto square my natal sun right now, and I notice my inner life is definitely more intense, but I'm really enjoying it, you know, because I'm having ways that I can kind of keep up with it in you know, mini sessions, as I call them. Cannabis is a very effective sort of light way to keep up with our unconscious contents. If you're healthy enough emotionally and physically and are drawn to this, then, and you have 4 or 5 hours of time, turn off your phone, put on some nice world music and smoke the cannabis and lie down, and then just surrender and stay on your back unless you have to go to the washroom in this modality I'm describing, and then just lie back and let the mother give birth to you. Don't try to direct the process. Let your body move, make any sounds come out. And it's a great way to keep up with the releasing process that's trying to happen. So erupting volcanoes, Groff calls this the volcanic type of ecstasy. Incinerating, sort of filthy body, or sense of decay, blasting rockets. Now, I'm going to show you 3 charts of 3 great songwriters and similar expressions during those transits. So this is Madonna in March of '89 when she released her great video, Like a Prayer. I think that's, well, it's tied to, for me, with Ray of Light for her most exciting, greatest video. Very powerful archetypal video. This is the bi-wheel chart here. Here's Madonna's natal chart and, of course, the transits. Transiting Pluto was in opposition with her Mars and square her Uranus. So it was lighting up her Mars-Uranus. It was also bringing in the sun because the sun was part of this field of Mars-Uranus sun. So she was just about to start the Pluto square sun. So, and you remember the fires, the sort of blasphemous sort of imagery, the sort of sexual images, and then this resolves in, now, this is not like, we know these images in such a negative way from the KKK. Here she is sort of exposing these sort of bad, white people that have raped this woman or killed this woman and then set up this African American guy to take the fall. So she's sort of calling them out. The whole feeling resolves in transcendence as the music hits a major G chord. And what a great video. If you haven't seen this recently, check it out. Pluto, Uranus, and Pluto, Mars energy. Now, that same year, a little bit later, Billy Joel released his We Didn't Start the Fire, his most powerful song with transiting Pluto here, opposition his natal sun, and it had just finished the opposition to his Mars. So and sort of in the sunset effect, the transits don't just end; they kind of linger on after we've been in them for a while, and so quite similar to Madonna's transits. And you remember this video, very powerful video and quite exciting with sexual energies and sense of libido and evolutionary force, and then really intense images from the news, like negative things that have happened, and then a lot of fire again. So Pluto is connected with that pyrocatharsis, remember? And then finally, Lady Gaga, closer to our own time, like 11 years ago, when she released Bad Romance, which was for quite a while the #1 video of all time. I think it's #2 now, or maybe #3. And her transit here was transiting Pluto on her Mars, so the same as the previous two examples. And it had already started to square her sun. We use a 3 to 5 degree orb, applying and separating in archetypal astrology. It had already come within that 5 degree orb, or more like 4 in the spring, and then Pluto went retrograde, but so she's still in the transit, and so Pluto, Mars, Pluto, Sun, and then Pluto conjunct Neptune, of course, brings in the theatrical sort of imaginative qualities in this video as well. Gail, have you seen that one? Bad Romance? Yeah, check it out. It's what the collective psyche has sort of spewed out or created forth, during this Uranus-Pluto square. And it was like one of the most important videos of the decade, highly. How about you, Katrina? You familiar with that one? Yeah. So again, you can see the fire here, and then it becomes even more intense at the very end. So just some other random examples of Plutonic films. Ken Russell, born with Sun, Pluto conjunction square Uranus, Jupiter. His films are very intensely Plutonic, right out of Groff's BPM 3. In his late 30s or early 40s, Pluto squared his natal Pluto. He came out with Altered States. It was released on Christmas Day, 1980, which was a very cheeky kind of time to release it. It's also the first month of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction within 15 degrees. The same one, Terminator, was at the end of that period. Also, Blade Runner was released in that last Saturn-Pluto conjunction in the early 80s. This has many elements in it, this movie, right out of Groff's writings and observations, if you want to check that out, Altered States. And his movie, The Devil's, also a wild perinatal atmosphere we could describe, with these crazy sort of demonic, sexual, aggressive energies running amok in these scenes. The Devil's, very intense. Now, Steven Spielberg, he was born in 1946 during the beginning of that Saturn-Pluto conjunction of the Cold War beginning. And Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was released in May of '84 during the final months of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction that we've been talking about. And that was the next one after the one he was born in. And it has this classic scene of Kali Ma. Remember that? Kali Ma, Kali Ma, and then the pit of fire. She gets dropped into the pit of fire. And then they're escaping, and they're in this high-speed chase scene, being pursued on these rail cars going, really fast around corners, very perinatal again, these kind of tunnels. And, when I saw this movie, I'd already, done a Groff month-long at Esalen when I was 20. And so as I'm in the theater, I'm going, wow, this is, this is like a death rebirth experience, and it came right out of the psyche of Spielberg and, of course, George Lucas, who wrote the screenplay. And there's a scene where Shorty, his kind of sidekick, is escaping, and he's climbing up a rope into this hole at the top of the cavern. And it reminded me of this painting by Groff, a perinatal image from a high-dose LSD session. That sense of danger, and you're kind of hanging from the umbilical cord. And sort of, I love these kind of archetypal correlations. Now, Beavis and Butthead Do America, released at the end of '96 during the great Jupiter-Uranus-Neptune triple conjunction. Some of you might remember that wild time, and then through most of '97, that's when Contact came out later on during the same conjunction. I only went to 2 astrology conferences in my life, and the second one was in February '97 in San Francisco, Cycles and Symbols Conference, during that conjunction. And Caroline Casey really stole the show. It was amazing, and Rick Tarnas also. But this, Mike Judge, of course, was born in the 60s, 62, with that Uranus-Pluto opposition Jupiter. And so this amplified Plutonic wildness of the Uranus-Pluto, and then expressed with the imaginative zaniness of the Uranus-Neptune. And this is the famous peyote sequence in Beavis and Butthead Do America. They brought in a special team of animators who were familiar with psychedelics, and it's really one of the wildest depictions of a BPM-3 experience. I wish I could show it to you, but check it out. You could just find that particular part of it. Peyote sequence, really interesting. And then finally, example of art, Picasso's famous Guernica, transiting Pluto square his natal sun, when he painted this, and a Saturn trine Pluto world transit. His universal declaration against war, images of violent destruction, horror, and torture, Dionysian dismemberment of reality. Okay, and then Linda Perry's song. Now, she was born in '65. The Uranus-Pluto was in opposition with Saturn, remember, in the mid-'60s. But when she was born, Mars was conjunct that Uranus-Pluto. And so that intense drive for, revolution or inner revolution, some kind of psychological change, this fierce, impassioned yearning for liberation and breakthrough. And I love this picture, and I just realized the other day, kind of a perinatal connotation the way she's holding her head, in a sense. It's just one way that we could see that. It's interesting. Sinead O'Connor was born exactly 1 Mars cycle later than Linda Perry. So she also has Mars, Uranus, Pluto opposition Saturn. So these are very similar to the transits in the sky right now, of course, and also very intense. But Sinead O'Connor is even more intense. She has Sun in a T-square with it, and one of my faves. And then bands like Green Day, Billie Joe Armstrong, born with the Uranus-Pluto at the end in 1972. The punk rock and heavy metal would, example, all be expressions of Pluto. Now, I'm gonna have to go a little faster through this final matrix. Sense of liberation, breakthroughs, and freedom. When the infant comes out of the birth canal, there's a sense of enormous decompression of space. There can be images of blinding white or golden light, a feeling of having transcended the fear of death when people are reliving this, feeling of rebirth, renewal, redemption, and forgiveness, awakening. And Uranus is connected with that. So Uranus transits are like a cosmic midwife pulling our consciousness through our leftovers connected with Saturn and Pluto and trying to pull us back into the divine consciousness. That's what Uranus transits want to take us toward. And if we cooperate with them and do systematic inner work, then we come to look forward to Uranus transits, and really all transits, because all transits are moving us toward our inner healer and wholeness. So some images from this perinatal matrix: transcendence of the ego. This is from a holotropic breathwork session with transiting Uranus opposition her natal sun. Surrender, it's called, from a Norwegian participant. This is Amina Ray, Uranus conjunct her natal Mars. You see the fierceness of it and the sense of giving birth to a new self. Also Pluto conjunct her natal moon. Uranus-Mars transits can have that feeling of explosive liberation. And it's really important to allow ourselves to have these experiences. So moving toward light. Peacock feathers are a universal symbol of rebirth that can appear in people's sessions. This is one of Groff's sessions. He had the Uranus-Pluto of the 60s was square his natal Venus. And you see him coming through the purifying fire here. There's the spine of his mom, and then into the realm of the Peacock Mother Goddess. I believe there's a Venus trine Uranus world transit right now, so I'm hoping you're enjoying the kind of color and the art here. Opening the inside of giant halls and cathedrals, which depict the opening of space and decompression of space. So these cathedrals can kind of remind us of that part of our own perinatal journeys. And then images of the end of wars or revolutions or, Cold War. There's the Great Mother, Queen of Heaven, giving the riches of infinite adventures in consciousness. That's another rebirth image by Christina Groff. The death and rebirth of deities such as Osiris, Dionysus, Persephone, or Christ. People can identify with these figures. They can feel like they are them. They are having that experience. Reunion with the divine feminine in the form of Isis, Demeter, Lakshmi. Very similar colors to your mandala, Gail. Yeah, love that. Yeah. Parvati or Mary and others, but these are the most common ones. Or a reunion with divine, with God, or the divine in a more abstract form, such as radiant light. So I just put that in there just to, if you want to come back and look at it. Now, just a couple brief examples of BPM-4 imagery in films. The final month of the great Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, December 97, this scene of the front of Titanic. And, when I saw that, I knew it was a symbol of the whole culture was transcending. It wasn't just these characters in this movie. There was something happening. We were leaving some of the constrictions of the past behind. And it's not a one-time thing. It's an incremental process, right? Like ferrying across a part of our consciousness to the other side. And right now we're in a struggle to ferry some more of ourselves across. And this is just that one step back period, before the two steps forward. And I see that as coming. We'll start tackling climate change now and other good things. The Truman Show right after that period. What a great movie. Thanks, Katrina. Appreciate your, sharing your enthusiasm there. Wow, this just blew me away. What a profound movie. So lighthearted and fun, and yet deeply profound. It's basically a metaphor for leaving the Maya world and exiting and getting into the real world. And Christoph is the director, a explicit reference to Christ, and the sort of, there's a part of the divine which kind of creates the Maya world for the adventures in consciousness that it allows. And there's some resistance built in. Otherwise, we would all just see through it and wake up. So that's the Saturn force in the universe that kind of compresses consciousness. But at certain points, especially during these Uranus-Neptune eras, there's a sense of leaving that behind and waking up. And this is what is being depicted in this famous Flammarion engraving. That's from the Truman Show. I was thinking of this when I saw that in the theater. And then holy smoke, really one of my favorite all-time movies. Have you seen that one, Katrina? Wow, Jane Campion directed this, and it's got this zany Australian and Kiwi humor, really outrageous, and yet it is an incredibly profound exploration of the interplay of the mundane and the spiritual, her Saturn, Neptune, resolving in a mature and grounded spirituality, also Saturn, Neptune, impulses towards service and blessed forgiveness. And again, it was Kate Winslet. And this is a vision of Parvati and Harvey Keitel is in this. You've got to see this movie, everyone. This is amazing. Pleasantville was also good, a little more kind of modest, lighthearted, very accessible, but a very explicit homage to the liberating, emancipatory forces of Uranus, and a really fun movie. And then a great Uranus song is There Must Be an Angel, Playing With My Heart by the Eurythmics, right at the outset of the Uranus-Neptune conjunction. I consider this kind of a outlier particle in advance of the approaching wave, is like how a description that Tarnas uses, not for this particular song, but you can see the signature of Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune in the world transits and in both of their natal charts. And this is a beautiful video. Check this one out. It's just an absolutely triumphant, the look on her face, that feeling is like one of the greatest feelings that humans can have. So there is the overall context for these 4 planetary archetypes in this model. And I commissioned an artist to draw this sort of BPM-4 image, which shows the explicit role of the mom in that ecstatic reconnection with the feminine in the rebirth stage. I think we probably won't have time to. I'll just say that, so Contact was released with Uranus-Neptune conjunction sextile Pluto. She goes through this death rebirth phase with like really kind of violent wormholes and stuff, like a birth struggle. And then she ends in this oceanic realm, which is a very explicitly portrayed and beautifully portrayed, that lasts for many minutes, this oceanic realm. Basically Groff writes about. And there you can see when Contact was released, Uranus, Neptune, both sextile Pluto. So those 3 planetary archetypes. So the death, rebirth, struggle, and then the rebirth, and then into the oceanic realm of Neptune. Now, similarly, Space Odyssey, 2001, A Space Odyssey, was released in April 1968. Here, Uranus-Pluto conjunction was sextile Neptune. So the same 3 planetary archetypes. This is the very end of 2001, The Space Odyssey. What a movie. So conjunctions are stronger than sextiles. So in my mind, that sort of accounts for the fact that there's a like almost a 20-minute death rebirth struggle in 2001 Space Odyssey, which then resolves in a very brief kind of Neptunian image of the divine child in space. Probably remember that, or you know, that one there. And so, but sextiles are weaker. So here it's Uranus Pluto, so a much longer birth struggle, whereas contact is the Uranus Pluto is the struggle phase, and then the Uranus Neptune, this hyperactivated Neptune, the much more extended and developed Neptunian realm at the end. So just I won't read these. You can check out the recording if you want, just some of my thoughts on astrology in general. And that's my last slide. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I do look forward, if we have some time for some questions, I'm good for as long as yeah. So I will.
We have plenty of time for questions.
Beautiful, beautiful. So great. Yeah.
Got
So
everything.
thanks.
But where were you born? I was copying it down. Where were you born?
In Edmonton, Alberta.
Edmonton.
Mountain Standard Time, April 17, 60. Yeah. So yeah, Katrina.
Katrina, you have to unmute yourself. She has this Pluto experience.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I have a whole bunch of questions, but I'll try to leave room for other people. So, wow, this is so amazing to me, because just yesterday I was talking to Frank, and I've been talking to some other people, that I have had long-term trauma, and I've been thinking about doing psychedelics since I've been hearing about MDMA therapy. And of course, I've known lots of people doing ayahuasca and everything for all these many years, and LSD even, but so that whole part is really amazing. But during the break, I was talking to Gail about when you were showing that whole birth thing, it was so amazing because I almost died when I was giving birth to my first child. And so all of those different, the different ways that you described that, I totally experienced all that, like the unstoppable force. It won't stop unless you die. There's nothing that can stop it. It's like I was on this train and I couldn't get off, and anyway, I almost died. And so there's a couple of things that I have out of that. Is like, so it always seems like, you know, the way we like to think about it is, oh, it's so difficult, and then resolution comes, and the, you know, phoenix rises from the ashes with Pluto. But that's not what happened with me. What happened with me is, yeah, it was wonderful after my baby was born and I didn't die, but I felt really like there was a gash that happened to my being from being like victimized by such horribly strong forces that were like me, but also bigger than me. So I'm sort of curious about like the Pollyanna aspect of, oh yeah, well, you know, the good thing always happens after the bad stuff. I mean, that's not how it felt for me. And then, so that's one question that I have. I mean, I feel like I have lived with that trauma kind of like, and you know, and Gail mentioned that, you mentioned that thing that Groff brought up about serious illnesses or accidents. That was like a near-death experience. I almost died. So there's that thing. And then the other question is, that has to do with the psychedelics, is the first time I took LSD, I was running away from a reform home, and I'd been on the road. I'd been raped by a truck driver. I was a runaway. I ended up in Hollywood, California. I was 16, barely 16. I took LSD in this very, you know, chaotic state. And all of these horrible images came up of like snakes and demons, and like some of those art that you showed, it was so, ugh. And luckily I had a few good trips after that, but I was a little scared that much darkness was in my subconscious. You know, once I started learning more about it, when I got to be in my later teens and early 20s, So I'm just curious about, of course I was a little kid, I was a little girl basically in a very traumatic kind of chaotic state, but I still feel like there's, when people talk about you have to have trust with your therapist when you do the psychedelic therapy, man, I don't know that I would ever have enough trust to, I don't know how much it would take for me to have enough trust to have a positive experience. So anyway, I just had a couple of thoughts. So I would be curious to hear if you have anything to say about that stuff.
Thanks for sharing those, Katrina. Yeah,
Okay.
very, very intense experiences.
Yeah, I'm a pretty intense person.
Well, the universe is intense. Yeah, as well. If you can find a therapist who's willing to, do psychedelic sessions with you, that would be a dream come true. So yes, if you can find something like that, that would be great. The next best option might be a spiritual friend that you could trade with. So you start with a small catalyst like MDMA or cannabis. So one of you, it's your session day, let's say, and your friend sits for you, and she would be sober. And then, in a couple of weeks, you trade, and you would sit for her, for example. So that would be like the second best way to do it. But, it's not easy to face these things, but it's harder to keep them in. It's harder to keep them suppressed. They are already affecting us. So it's safer than people realize to go into those states and let that stuff come out. And you're right, trust is the most important factor. So, if you've been raped, then you definitely want to have a female therapist, at least one female in the room. Just in case that comes up, then, you've got this sort of sense of safety from the female. But having a good male therapist there at the same time, because it's very nice to have a male and a female sitting. This is what Groff recommends, or two spiritual friends, not someone you're sexually involved with, like a partner, but friends. A responsible, good male sitter, because they're not going to repeat that pattern. That can go a long ways toward correcting those basic trust issues, and but we have to sort of go through those vulnerable times, and you just like, I hope it's better this time, that the humans don't hurt me like they did the last time. But it's an honor to sit for people, and therapists want to help us, so it's safer than you think. Is that the route you're thinking of going, is with the therapist?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that this keeps coming up, because you know how when things come in threes, you're like, oh, it seems like a message from the universe. I keep getting these messages about doing this. And I've been thinking about it for about 10 years now. And it's kind of crystallizing. Like just last night, I watched a TED Talk on it. And actually the guy used in his talk one of the same comments that you used in your talk. It probably came from Groff, but I don't remember what it was. But yeah, I'm just, so you've done that. You've done that with a lot of people?
No, not a lot of people. The bulk of my experiences were my own sessions that I did, and also holotropic breathwork sessions. But yeah, I mean, it's a miracle what's happening right now, and I hope it continues. What the work that MAPS is doing to allow this decriminalization of psychedelic medicines. It's all in the way they're used. It's an adjunct to psychotherapy, so you want to do it with trustworthy people. But basically, your inner healer will be doing most of the work.
Well, one thing I'd like to say as a positive thing, and then I'll move on and let somebody else have a question, is it's curious to me, and I'm just going to put this out there as a seed for creation, that we can all co-create this. It's interesting how in all the movies that maybe not all of them, but so many of the movies, most of the movie is about the struggle, And why can't we just have Like when that contact scene happened and she was in that blissful space, I wanted that part to last for like 45 minutes. And so I'm just going to say right now that all of the creators, the Hollywood people, the writers, the visionaries, they need to make that part and nourish our consciousness. We have enough of the struggle part, you know? Let us bask in the deliciousness of those scenes and the music and that expansive. Please give us that art. So more minutes of that, less minutes of the dead bodies and guns and knives and all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, our psyches crave for those Neptunian unitive states.
Yeah.
Melted or oceanic ecstasy. And, when you start having those in your course of therapy and reaching those states, then you'll look at movies and go, yeah, I can see why people need a certain amount of that struggle, So the main thing is to have those experiences yourself. Yeah. So good luck. And thanks for sharing that.
Thank you for and I also just want to say your speaking skill was so delightful. You're so clear. And it was I just really congratulate you on the work you've done, or however you are to be such a great presenter. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. So I didn't do too much LDS in the 60s.
Yes. Renn, Derek has a question.
Yeah.
He can't talk. Doesn't have the microphone, but he said he'd like to contact you regarding his one and only LSD experience. I'd like to run it by you and just get your comments. He could even add it to you could add it to your files. Is that okay? I don't know, Derek, I guess you'd have to contact Renn.
Sure, Derek. Yeah. I mean, we could also look at your transits for that time sometime. We could do like a short transit reading if you wanted something like that, or if you just want to just chat on the phone for a few minutes, that would be fine too. Yeah.
When you were talking with Katrina, it made me think of that Enya.
Right.
Okay, so Derek says yes, email okay? Yeah, so.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, I should mention that I've just started a 10-month online course in archetypal and holotropic astrology, where we'll be looking at a lot of different, we're talking about movies and music and art and literature, poetry, philosophy, and dreams and psychedelic experiences. It's going to be like a rich cornucopia of archetypes, and that's just started. So it's not too late if any of you would like to join. I don't mind giving you a special Tucson Astrologers Guild discount either. So.
So that's nice of you. And your email address, I can always forward your email address if anybody emails me. And of course, you got his website, rennbutler.com. I mean, that's not how you can contact him. Do you have your course advertised on your website, Renn?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yeah.
There you go, Renn Butler at shaw.ca for his email.
Yeah. Look forward to it, Derek. Yeah.
10-month course sounds something like you'd like to have some cannabis on hand to do this course with you.
Anybody around here needs some.
Yeah, cannabis can be amazing. Even with cannabis, there might be points in journeys where, during certain transits where you might want to have a sitter there, like a spiritual friend who you can hold hands with at certain points in the journey. At other times, many people can do these journeys with cannabis on their own, and it's not that illegal in most places, or it's not at all illegal in many states.
Let's hope that Arizona legalizes it.
Yeah.
It's on the ballot.
Yeah, but if you do it in the way that where you lie down and you listen to music and you let it be kind of a journey, it becomes quite a powerful experience. So
Yeah.
But I also have to say that you mentioned when you said that in your talk, Ren, you said, if you're healthy enough. And so, like me, I have PTSD. I wouldn't recommend that people do that unless they are healthy enough and have a lot of support.
Yeah, but
You
there
know,
are many
with
people.
marijuana, yeah.
There are many people out there that smoke pot quite a bit already. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's just a sort of changing the focus to less often and more deliberately,
Yeah.
you know, yeah. But yes, absolutely. Yeah, any other questions?
I don't see any. Does anybody else have a question they want to put in chat or
So how about some immediate, like we have this Jupiter, this Pluto, Saturn heavy thing going on now for another year. Can you please give us some wonderful little happy weather that's going to happen to kind of lighten things up a little, like a little for a week or two? It's going to be like a reprieve. Is there anything?
Well,
Please.
well, you know, the Uranus
You're
work
laughing at me,
for
aren't
a
you?
week or two. You know, if you get into a course of therapy, Katrina, with a therapist like that, you will appreciate that Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto more than any other possible archetypes. So, you know, we want to complete the process, and that Saturn, Pluto can bear down on us and make us do the work, you know? So that's one level. Another is, you know, if Biden wins, Biden and Harris win, you know, he's talking about like starting that Green New Deal that we need. And that is going to be the beginning of the middle phase of solving the problem. The beginning of the middle phase. And we're in a heap of trouble with climate change, but at least we'll be now starting to work toward the solution. So that's beyond exciting to me. And the thought of her becoming president, wow, that's fantastic. I think that's quite a miracle after all that we've been through. For the dust to clear and then to have her as the president, that looks like a wonderful rebirth to me.
And if Trump gets elected, we should all just go ahead and try to move to Canada.
Well, we love to have as many astrologers up here as possible. We should be fast tracking astrologers. But if Trump wins, then we just, you know, keep doing sessions. That's the most important thing we can do, is to work on our own healing.
work on ourselves?
And as well as whatever outer activism or philanthropy you do, you know, work with your unconscious too. Yeah. Can you speak about Saturn conjunction? Oh, Mars Saturn conjunction. Yeah, well, sometimes it can have that BPM2 quality. Annika, are you referring to like a natal conjunction? Yeah. Sometimes it can feel like Mars is constricted. You know, it's like our passion, our energy, our enthusiasm, or our anger are all being kind of held in, compressed in by circumstances. It's not safe for us to express those things. But we develop healthy breaks. We can regulate and limit ourselves and be patient. And it can also help us to work long and hard and regulate our energies over long periods of time. It's very valuable for working with metal, glass, stone, you know, manual labor, or like pumping weights can sometimes release tension, things like that. It can be connected with memory systems around choking as well, Annika. Sometimes under Mars Saturn transits, people can relive some kind of suffocation in their lives or childhood, and it might often be rooted in suffocation in the birth canal. And so it's very beneficial to relive that and feel that deeply. You can sometimes release some of that by pressing down above your clavicle, not into your windpipe, but between your windpipe and the bone, like go down to evoke the coughing response. That can sometimes release some of that. And if you ever feel tense in your throat, try to release that cough, get that coughing response. And that can, I believe that is often perinatal leftovers that are surfacing. It's also good to do dynamic tension exercises. If you're feeling frustrated, press your palms together like this, or make fists, growl. There's one way to kind of get in touch with the Mars Saturn. Yeah. But I'm sure you're a hard worker, and Mars Saturn people are good at completing projects. And yeah. This doesn't have to be the end, but I will just say it's really been an honor, and you know, thanks. I got to hang out with some people from Arizona. That is so cool.
Where are you? Are you in Victoria?
We're in the San Diego of Canada, Victoria, the southwest corner. But
Is that where those beautiful gardens are?
Yeah. And it's beautiful up here, but the winters are wet and damp and dark. You know, days are short, so we long for places like Arizona and New Mexico. If anyone has a suite that they would like to rent us for a couple months, maybe we'll come down in the spring. Yeah.
I have a campground with a
You have a campground?
little trailer in it. Yeah, we have camp. I'm out here in the desert. Got a little camper and if you like more of a camping experience, I think most of the places on it's a great place to many people have enjoyed being here on my land, south of Tucson.
Oh, well, that's exactly what I was hoping for, something like that. I want to be in desert.
Fabulous starry skies at Gail's place. Fabulous.
That sounds very, very intriguing.
Bathed by the Milky Way.
Yeah.
I'll send you a link to my website. Anyway, we really have appreciated having you, Renn. It's such a pleasure to meet somebody, you know, that can offer us this such broad range of experience with this material. It's great. It's been such pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
so welcome. Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Tom, Derek, everybody. It's really been a fun evening. Hey, Cynthia.
Thank you.
I think this was a very good lecture discussion on a different, maybe I don't know what word to use, style or perspective of astrology. We've had lots of speakers over the years who give very good and informative talks, but they're astrology, you know, how to do midpoints and what the asteroids mean and the importance of minor aspects and technical astrology, the mechanics of astrology. But this was much more types and the myths and the subconscious, but still tying it in, of course, to transits and natal positions and all that. So it was very worthwhile.
Oh, thanks, Frank. Glad you enjoyed it. Yeah.
Any other comments, anybody?
Good luck. We'll be thinking about you. We
Hope
love
to see you down here.
We both love the United States, and we have the highest faith in your ability to keep moving toward that increasing freedom, which is the birthright of America.
Thank you. Thank you for remembering it's still here.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Hey.
Bye.